Okay, guys, if you thought Kurt Russell was pretty bad in John Carpenter's Escape from LA, well, you've got another surprise coming, and that is in the form of Soldier from 1998. It has a 12% on the tomato meter and a 44% on the audience score. It is not completely forgotten because it does have over 44,000 user reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. It is certainly rotten, and I will say that I agree with both of these scores. I pretty much think these Rotten Tomato scores are accurate. I'm surprised, in fact, that it has a 44%, that actually 44% of audience reviewers thought it was 2.5 or better stars. I'm surprised it's not a little lower, but I think it's still fair. The big reason for me that this movie feels rotten is that it is very much a very cheap B movie. It's very much striving to become more than a B movie. It was marketed as certainly much more than a B movie. Kurt Russell's name alone told people back in the day that this was not going to be a B movie, and yet it is straight up a B movie, and it doesn't take much of the film's running time before you can just say, well, you're either going to continue watching this and consider it a B movie, low budget, not supposed to be taken serious, and you can finish it in that regard, or you could straight up just say this is garbage and it's rotten and just judge it like you would a big budget Hollywood movie and just shut it off. Because this movie, it does for me what is the greatest sin that any movie can do, and that is it becomes boring at about halfway through its running time. It's supposed to be an action, sci-fi, adventure, etc. However, it just straight up becomes boring about halfway through. Yeah. So let's get right to the audience reviews and find out what other people think. And then I have quite a list of my own, mostly of plot problems, and some nitpicks on the fact that a lot of stuff in here is just ridiculously low budget and it's too obvious. But let's get right to these audience reviews. We're looking at some 4-star reviews on the front page from 2019. I'm not going to entertain those because this is an episode of Rotten Reviews for a reason. This is not a 4-star film, not by any stretch of the imagination. So here's our first 2-star review, September 18, 2018. Always liked this movie. Well, this reviewer is saying they always liked it, but they're still saying that it sucks, that it's rotten. So I don't know what to say about that, but I will say I will consider this a 1-star movie. No more than 1 star because it had a lot of opportunities to be something. It had a lot of opportunities to be funny, be campy, to entertain me in a sort of laugh out loud, it's so bad, it's good way, yet it blew every single opportunity to be that type of film. You can go back to John Carpenter films, like Escape from LA, and you can see that it's just making fun of itself. It's so bad that it's good in a lot of ways. However, this Kurt Russell movie, there's no charm of Kurt Russell in this. There's no one-liners. There's no quipping like he did back in Big Trouble in Little China. There's nothing like that to entertain you because Kurt Russell has very few lines. Maybe he has less than 30 lines in this entire film, and it just doesn't work. I mean, why did they cast Kurt Russell to just stare at people in the camera a lot? I don't know why. They could have cast anybody else to do that job, and they wouldn't have had to pay somebody the big bucks because his name wouldn't have been Kurt Russell. So I'll say 1 star, and there's just nothing here to even laugh at and drink a few beers and get some kind of enjoyment. It's just straight up a wasted opportunity. Let's move down. I'm seeing more 4- and 5-star reviews. I just can't take them seriously. I'm not going to entertain anything above 3 stars. 3 stars is generous enough here. But let's see our first 3-star review, January 20, 2018, being more than 2 years ago. I didn't mind it. Pretty good story. Well, see, there's another reviewer that's saying, well, I didn't really think it was that bad. I disagree. It's rotten for a reason, so let's continue on. 1.5 stars, August 14, 2017. As enjoyable as a fart in a hot car with the window locks on. Yeah, you can't take this seriously. You can actually get through this, like I said, by accepting that you're watching a B movie. But when it starts to get boring about halfway through, I felt like fast forwarding it. I really did. 3 stars. Wow, 3 stars from September 30, 2016. Sci-fi action fun movie. No, it's not. I don't know what's with these reviews. I don't know why there are so many 4-star reviews and people with, you know, 2-star reviews just saying that this thing was really great in some way. Let's get right to my list before I get too sidetracked. Yeah, there's no dialogue in most of this. The whole movie opens with a long training montage type scene showing that this soldier character played by Kurt Russell, he has been chosen from birth, literally from birth. He has been assigned to a military unit and trained as a remorseless killing machine, as a super soldier. Um, but all of this long montage of him training over the years, it's it's nothing remarkable, and it doesn't really work for me because there are no lines of dialogue between anybody. Kurt Russell doesn't have dialogue. His trainers don't have dialogue. And it's very reminiscent of a film that in the modern day would try to be painting something in a message way. Like this movie is showing what are called American forces in the future, like 40 years in the future. It is portraying American forces as being like space Nazis or space colonial marine Nazis, and they are remorseless killers. They don't care about civilian deaths. They don't care about anything, really. They're also very wasteful of military resources, but they are completely remorseless and ruthless, and they are the bad guys, even though they are called American forces. And, I say American forces because on their uniform it actually has an actual sewn-on patch that just says American forces. So if this were done in the modern day, it would definitely be a message movie trying to tell you something about, aggressive, ruthless imperial Americanism or whatnot. However, this was in 1998, and it wasn't really intended as a message. It was intended to be taken seriously. That's what I got from watching this. And I saw this back in the day. I saw this when it was released on home video on VHS cassette from Blockbuster back when it was a new release. And I remember I remember sitting through the whole thing and not being totally turned off by it, but it has aged really badly for me, and I just couldn't, I had to force myself to sit through this whole thing, whereas when I was 27, 28 years old, I didn't mind watching the whole thing on home video, but I had to force myself. It's aged really badly, and it's just bizarre to me that all of this stuff in this movie that's present, it was just a missed opportunity. It could have presented some kind of weird messaging, a political message. It could have actually been something funny to laugh at. It could have become campy, but like I said, it doesn't. It's like nothing at all, really. Like, it doesn't intend to give you a message. It doesn't make you laugh. It doesn't make you cry. It's classified as an action adventure, but there's no real adventure. Most of this film, Kurt Russell, he's left for dead on a junk planet. Like, it's basically a planet that's just straight up a gigantic junkyard. And you can tell that the movie was low budget because they just filmed it inside like a junkyard of some type that they dressed up a little bit. And well, either that or they actually hauled the contents of a modern day, what would be a 1990s modern day junkyard, to a set somewhere, because this could accurately be called more like the planet of old parking meters. Because how can I explain this? It's just the first bad part of this movie is the logic fail, where you have a sci-fi futuristic world, if you will, that's only 40 years in the future, like it's in the year 2036, and yet with 1990s technology, humans are shown traveling interstellar distances and colonizing worlds and having wars on moons of distant star systems and these gigantic spaceships. You know, what you would see in a spacefaring civilization, something similar to what you would see in the Alien franchise. And yet, this is only 40 years in the future from the late 90s, and it looks like it's 40 years in the future from the late 90s. It's just straight up 1990s technology, but we're somehow colonizing the stars with that technology, and it doesn't work. And inside this junkyard planet in the future, you have like parking meters from the 80s and 90s and cars, junk cars from the 80s, and you know, stuff that's obviously not that old. It can't be more than 20 or 30 years old. And yet it's supposed to be on this alien junk planet across the star system. This doesn't work on a lot of levels. It really doesn't, you know. They should have said it like 200 years in the future, but I guess they couldn't because they didn't have the budget. If they had set this 200 years in the future, like what the Alien franchise would have done, then they would have had to up the visual effects budget to explain, you know, things like soldier technology, like cool guns that the soldiers would have. And, you know, in this film, they couldn't do that. They didn't have the budget. So we actually have special forces in the future where they're like evil space marine soldiers that don't have night vision technology. They use like what are very much guns from the 80s and 90s. And all of the military tech is from the time period of the 80s and 90s, yet they're on other planets fighting wars. I mean, it makes no sense. It absolutely makes no sense. And on top of that, the visual effects budget is really bad. Every time you see like a spaceship flying through space and going into orbit of a planet and etc., it looks so bad, and the green screen is so bad and so cheesy. And even from a 1990s, a late 90s point of view, this is low budget. It is straight up B-movie, low budget stuff. Even in the 1970s, movies were far superior in the visual effects, showing spaceships and whatnot. This looks really bad, even by the 90s standards. So that's why I don't understand how we get these 4 and 5-star reviews. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. I'm at a loss because I just watched this film about an hour ago for the first time since 1998, and I was expecting to come here and find just review after review after review saying that this was rotten. Instead, I'm finding review after review saying that it's 4 stars. I don't get it. Maybe we'll find out as I go through this what's going on here. 2 stars from June 13, 2016. We're back almost 4 years in time now. A ripoff. Although this is an enjoyable film and I'm a huge fan of Kurt Russell, I strongly believe that this film is a total ripoff of an illustrated story called The War Machine from a 1993 issue of Heavy Metal magazine. Well, that's interesting. First I've heard of it, but yeah, it could be. It is puzzling to me because the screenwriter of Soldier, David Peoples, wrote the screenplays for Blade Runner and Unforgiven, among others, and hence obviously has talent. You can read said story here and draw your own conclusions, and they put a link to Heavy Metal magazine. So yeah, it could be that this was ripped off from a magazine published story. Yeah, well, they mentioned David Peoples. Yes, he wrote the screenplays for Blade Runner and The Unforgiven. And then you see this and you're wondering, well, what happened? And I'm also wondering why Kurt Russell chose to be in this. Like, I know he was in Escape from LA just 1.5, 2 years before this. 2 films before this, he was in Escape from LA. It bombed at the theater. It was B-movie. It wasn't trying to be anything more than a B-movie. Yet he comes into this thing. I don't know. Was he thinking that this was going to be another campy Escape from LA and fans of his would enjoy it even though it would flop? I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know what anybody was thinking with this. It's very bizarre. You have other stars in this that have been in a lot of other big stuff. Jason Scott Lee, Connie Nielsen, Michael Chiklis, who actually has hair. He's got like the, you know, bowling ball with a hula skirt. that old phrase of the hairstyle where you're basically bald, but you haven't shaved the sides yet. And he looks kind of weird like that, a younger Michael Chiklis before he was famous for, playing police detectives that were totally bald, and before he was in the Fantastic Four. I forgot what he looked like when he still had hair, and he was kind of still had a patch of hair on top that was balding. And I don't know why he didn't shave it. He just looks really bizarre in this, but he's in this. And Gary Busey, of course, I can't go without mentioning Gary Busey. Gary Busey is just like a character you want in something that's a campy B movie. You would want him in something like an Escape from LA, certainly, but in this, he's not used for anything like that. In this, he plays a totally straight up, straight military character. Doesn't have any funny dialogue, doesn't try to be campy, doesn't try to ham it up, but he also, it looks like sometime during the filming he was under the weather or he was suffering from some condition, because despite the makeup attempts to make him look perfectly healthy, I could kind of get the sense that he wasn't, like there was something going on with his health. And so I don't know why he did this. I guess just to get a paycheck, because his heart wasn't in it. He wasn't there to like spice it up or make it bizarre or campy. He was just there to be there and collect a paycheck, I guess. Maybe everybody involved in this just needed the paycheck. It's hard to believe, because even in the late 90s, they all had better options. But I don't know. Let's move on and see what we can learn here. 3 stars. We're back in September of 2015 now. Just a good, solid 90s action flick. Kurt Russell plays a robot-like soldier kicking ass and taking names as he gets replaced by super soldiers and thrown out like trash. The first hour was pretty slow with hardly any dialogue from Russell, but the last 25 minutes was solid action and pretty good too. The effects look dated, but it doesn't ruin the film too much. It's just a nice way to kill an hour and 30 minutes. Well, this reviewer's being way too kind. I can kind of see where he's coming from, but his standards, I guess he just thinks that because Kurt Russell in this, he's giving it more credit than it deserves, because this is just straight up rotten, and even for Kurt Russell, this is beneath him. I don't know why he did this, I really don't. And yeah, like that reviewer said, Kurt Russell he can't have more than 30 lines, if that, in the whole film. So what was he doing there? I mean, if I just wanted to see Kurt Russell stare at me for like 30 or 40 or 50 minutes, then I guess this is the movie to watch, because that's all he really does. Very, very much a waste of a talented actor. Half a star, August 10, 2015. Absolutely terrible. I agree with that, but I still say 1 star, because I didn't just fast forward the whole thing. It got to there. It got to the boring parts for me, but I still stuck it out. So, and back in the 90s, I recall not feeling that this was quite as rotten as I do now. So I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and say 1 star, but I can see where you're coming from with the half a star. Let's take a look at my list. I've got mostly plot nitpicks, and I could say they're nitpicks because I've already accepted by this part. By the time I started writing things down on my list, I had already accepted I was watching a B movie, and so I should give it more credit. I should be a little more lax on it, but no, I just jotted down all the plot problems anyway, the big ones. Yeah, in 2036, we're on alien planets and stuff with 1990s technology. It doesn't make any sense. I already mentioned that. There's a scene in which Kurt Russell is shown being dropped from quite a distance. He's dropped onto an alien planet from a cargo ship, a trash dumping ship. The height they show the ship at, it should have killed him, whether he's a super soldier or not. No human could have survived that fall, and yet it just shows him getting up and dusting himself off, and it makes no sense. And along with the same problem in the plot, well, the reason the military threw him out literally with the trash is because they thought he was dead. He had some combat training exercise with another super soldier, and it looked like he was killed. However, he wasn't, and the audience watching could tell that he wasn't quite dead. He might have been injured severely, but he wasn't dead. However, the military just straight up thinks he's dead and throws him out with the trash, despite his commanding officer and another officer telling the audience by their arguing that the military has spent a fortune training these soldiers. It's a fortune of an investment to, make them into these super soldiers. And yet, when Kurt Russell's just laying there, they don't even check him to see if he has a pulse or he can be hospitalized or whatever. They just decide to throw him out with the trash despite spending millions of dollars training him and all this. It makes no sense. It tells you, that they're really concerned about the budget, the training budget that they have for these super soldiers. And then 2 minutes later, they just throw him out like the trash without even checking his pulse. And then he dusts himself off on top of a trash heap on this alien planet. And within a few minutes, his body's all back to normal and he looks fine, barely has a scratch. Yet somehow the military thought he was dead. This thing, wow, it's just straight up complete ridiculous plot fail, B movie or not. But let's continue with my list. Yeah, crash survivors, the people living on this garbage planet, they're like survivors from a ship that was passing by the system and it crashed on. It doesn't say what the purpose of the ship was, whether they were, it was like a transport ship or whatever. They were civilians and they crashed on this planet a long time ago. And despite their best efforts at getting rescued and sending up signals to the trash ships that regularly came to dump trash, nobody came to rescue them, and it's not really explained in the plot why all these people would never be searched for, never be rescued, and it would be impossible. Like, it just straight up, the movie straight up expects the audience to believe that an advanced, star colonizing American government, as it were, would just not be able to, or not even be bothered with rescuing people that crashed in different places. It makes no sense. And these people live on this junk planet and have made a little society for themselves, and they nurse Kurt Russell, Soldier character, back to health. But it just doesn't work, and the movie just hand waves away the whole plot logic of them just being there for years with no rescue, and that they've accepted that they're not going to get a rescue, so they long ago gave up trying to get rescued, despite the fact that every day one or two or three or even a dozen gigantic ships are showing up at low altitude and dumping trash. They've just long since given up trying to get rescued. It makes absolutely no sense, but that's this movie in a lot of ways. Let's see. Yeah, there's a scene in which Kurt Russell's character is chopping carrots on a cutting board, meal preparation, and he cuts himself, he cuts his finger. And number one, it's kind of unbelievable that such a precise, trained super soldier would just haphazardly cut himself cutting carrots on a cutting board. And then number two, after he cuts himself, he just looks at it and carries on cutting carrots despite the fact that his blood is mixing in with the carrot slices while he's cutting them, and he just stares off into space like he doesn't care. What? The super soldiers, like Kurt Russell's character, his name is Todd, or Sergeant Todd. It makes no logical sense because on one hand he's supposed to be this advanced super soldier, he's supposed to be special forces of some type, go on all these missions that regular soldiers can't do, and yet at the same time he's very dumb, he's very unaware, he's got psychological issues that make him clearly unstable, way too unstable to be in any kind of special forces in any U.S. Army, in any U.S. military I've ever encountered. They would never accept somebody with all these psychological problems, and they would never train a soldier to have all these problems. So a lot of things are contradictory and don't make any sense in this film, military-wise, soldiering-wise, despite the fact that this film is called Soldier. It's straight up a mockery of any logic you would expect to have in a film with the title Soldier. Let's continue on with some more audience reviews. May 2015, 2.5 stars. Not earth-shattering, non-stop action, but a moderate one-time watch day filler. I disagree. It's like 1 star because all the action, all the military action with soldiers fighting each other and etc., going on these missions, it's straight up cheap. Cheap as a B movie could possibly be. They didn't have any budget. You see soldiers shoot other soldiers in the most boring, non-exciting ways. Other B movies with even less of a budget have done it better. This is straight up just boring to watch these soldiers go about their business. There's nothing unique about it at all. And in fact, that's why I say it should have just straight up tried to be a campy comedy, because you could have had the same budget, but the audience would have been laughing their ass off and it would have been very enjoyable. But instead, it's just the most boring soldier type stuff I've ever seen. And look at all those 5-star reviews. My God, it's full of stars. Wow. And I'm not going to read those. 1.5 stars. We are in December of 2014. Oh, Paul W.S. Anderson, you always bring me such disappointment, and you always give me a deep rage inside of me in your films that feel unfinished in a strange way. Now he makes a film with Kurt Russell and Gary Busey and still manages to fuck it up, but still directing today. Why, may I ask? Yeah, how does a director do something like this and then just keep getting work? I don't know, but there's quite a few directors out there that do even worse than this and they keep getting work. And I don't know, it's a Hollywood thing. It's a politics thing, who you know and who you blow maybe. Who knows, but let me continue. The story is about our main character, Todd, who is an engineered military fighting machine, but after being left for dead on a remote planet, he starts a new life. That's kind of they're going to get into a plot summary. He doesn't really start a new life. He shows up, he tries to fit in with these survivors in their little junk village, and they exile him after a while because he's too psychologically unstable and fucked up in the head to just function in any kind of society, even a primitive junk trader society. So he's exiled, and then right after he's exiled, he starts crying like a little baby that he's been exiled from this scavenger society on this junk planet, which I found hard to believe, that this soldier, all the issues he's had, all the battles he's been in, he's like almost 40 years old. He's quite a veteran, lucky to be alive at all. And here he is just sitting there crying like a baby because some dirty junk scavengers kicked him out of their little village, that he had only been there a couple of days in the first place. It's totally ridiculous and dumb. And then shortly after that, the other super soldiers show up, and here's another problem with the plot. For some reason, these elite super soldiers, they don't have anything better to do, so they just go around to different planets randomly and check for trespassers. I don't know who the enemy of these American forces supposedly are. It's not aliens. You never see any aliens out there in this film. It's straight up just humans fighting other humans, but you never know what this gigantically expensive 1990s Space Marines type U.S. military, you never find out what it is they're trying to fight or who. I guess they're just fighting rebellions among colonists and whatnot, something like that. But the movie never tells you that. It just leaves that up to your imagination. And I guess these super soldiers, they're just so bored that they go around to these random planets checking for trespassers, and then if they find trespassers on these planets, they just consider them, they reclassify the trespassers, whoever they are, as hostiles, and then just go about wiping them out, men, women, and children, or whoever. It doesn't matter. If it moves, it gets shot. And I don't know why. I guess they just don't have anything else to do. There aren't any other important missions for these special forces to be doing. So they just go around killing innocent people. And of course, they show up to the trash planet and find out there's these people living on it. And instead of trying to figure out, who are these people and finding out that actually they'd probably like to be rescued now, no, they just classify them as hostiles and decide to wipe them all out for no reason, including, like I said, the men, women, and the children. It makes absolutely no sense. But again, if this movie were made today, it would, of course, be a political statement, saying that the U.S. military is an evil force. But no, this is just 1990s plot stupidity, no message intended at all. It's just supposed to be somehow cool in a futuristic sci-fi world to have the American Space Forces just wiping people out for no reason. Completely dumb, and that's why I say this only deserves 1 star at the most. 1 star, September 22, 2014. Could have further developed Todd's character. Yeah, it's kind of hard to develop a character that never speaks. When your character has like 20 lines in the whole film, it might be kind of difficult to develop them, right? And that's pretty much what you have here. Kurt Russell is just staring at people and staring at the camera a lot. So, yeah, it's left up to your imagination what might be going on in his head. It's a complete dumb fail. 3 stars, June 25, 2014. Entertaining sci-fi actioner starring Kurt Russell. This is an underrated film that is entertaining for what it is. No, it isn't. But also shows that it could have been much better as well. Directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, who has had a sketchy career, Soldier is one of those films that might entertain viewers that are looking for a mindless time waster to watch when they have nothing else to watch. Yeah, that's hard to believe. Well, that might be back in the 90s, but I'm sorry. We've got a lot of options today. There are reruns of all kinds of things on all kinds of crappy cable and satellite channels that are more fun to watch than this thing. So that's not going to cut it, but let me read on. Anderson, for me, a so-so director. I don't hate his work, but he's one of those directors that create popcorn action flicks. Well, yeah, but this isn't even a popcorn action flick. This is like, you know, that rotten bucket of popcorn that spilled on the floor and somebody peed on it too because they couldn't make it to the bathroom. This thing is just straight up rotten. Not even enjoyable to eat popcorn, I'm sorry. Anything, even watching the nightly news on one of the old dinosaur legacy media channels, like watching the CBS Evening News, would be a better watch with your popcorn than this. I'm just going to tell you straight out. That's my advice. Watch anything but this. Your popcorn isn't going to help this at all. Look at all those 4-star reviews. My God, it's just, my God, it's full of stars, you know, like the old 2001 Space Odyssey. My God, it's full of stars, and I cannot accept those stars. 3 stars. Kurt Russell, conditioned from birth to kill, learns to feel again. No, he doesn't. I'm sorry, what movie were you watching? Kurt Russell doesn't feel a damn thing. It even shows him slicing carrots at a cutting board, and he doesn't even hardly feel that his finger's bleeding all over the carrots. It shows you that he doesn't feel a goddamn thing. Even when he was sitting in like a big giant pipe and he was sitting there by himself and he was crying like a baby, I didn't feel anything or think he was feeling anything. It just looked like maybe he got dust in his eyes and tears were streaming out of his eyes. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what film these people are watching where they think that they saw this, you know, remorseless super soldier suddenly become a caring person. That's what I'm getting from, you know, glancing at these 4-star reviews. But I'm sorry, that's not this film. I don't know. This is all in these reviewers' imagination because I just watched this thing an hour ago. That's not in this film. 2.5 stars, February 19, 2013. Soldier has some fun action, but the characters are flat. That's an understatement. From the beginning, Todd, played by Kurt Russell, isn't a particularly interesting character. Sure, at first you sympathize with him because from infancy he's raised to be a killing machine, devoid of emotions and mercilessly gun down enemies without asking questions or having any regards for innocence. But then what? He's basically a robot, and although there are some tiny, very tiny hints that he starts to grow a heart, yeah, he just remains a cold-hearted robot throughout the entire film. Yeah, he cries in one scene, and for some reason he decides to kill all the other super soldiers and protect the survivors, the settlers on this junk world. But it doesn't even actually state why he does this, and he never states why. Actually, the movie just shows you him doing this because he enjoys doing it, and that's his job, to kill other soldiers. All these people saying that they think this character has had some kind of character arc, they are completely out to lunch. They're not watching this movie. They're watching something else in their imagination because none of that is in this film at any point. 2.5 stars. The type of film you only watch if it comes on your TV, which happened to me. But if you're a fan of sci-fi and action, you could do a lot worse. Well, you could do worse, sure. But that's like saying, well, you know, you drank that antifreeze. You could have done worse by drinking cyanide. Well, I prefer not to drink either one. So I don't think it's right to say there's worse stuff out there and then that means it's okay to watch this. I found this, you know why I remembered that this film existed? Not because, it's a shining gem in my memory from 1998. I remember this film because it just popped up on one of the HBO channels on DirecTV. I don't know, it just randomly popped up and I said, hey, that's interesting because it won't be censored or cut or whatnot, so I'll get to see it again, fresh. And yeah, it was like 5 minutes into it and I realized why it was rotten, and I realized it aged a whole lot worse than what I remember from back in the day when it was new. Let's continue. Yeah, 2.5 stars, December 2012. Remember, we're only like 4 pages into Rotten Tomatoes on these audience reviews, and we're already back. We're back 8 years, back 7 years certainly in time. Featuring a simple story with one man against the world theme, this action sci-fi movie has potential but fails in relying too much on simple violent action. The special effects are mediocre and reminiscent of Aliens, but then again, director has the movie Aliens vs. Predator on his resume. Yeah. Certain audio-visual similarity is definitely present. Fights and action is relatively intensive, and as such, there are some thrilling moments. There are so many silly moments, however, that this movie is in danger. Well, wow, you're giving this way too much credit. There is nothing thrilling here. There is nothing visually creative here. It is the most boring shit that I've seen in a long time for something categorized as an action-adventure sci-fi. Yes, I forgot to mention this same director. He did Aliens vs. Predator. That's actually better than this. It's more interesting to watch. It's rotten too, but it's a lot better to watch. I would watch that again before I sat through this again. Somehow this director, he keeps on trucking, doesn't he? 2.5 stars, galactic sci-fi with helpings of action and vengeance. Yeah, imagine galactic sci-fi, but the technology is from the late 90s. Doesn't really work, does it? Nope. 1 star, November 2012. A slow, unengaging science fiction action film for the 1990s. Soldier has only a lukewarm performance by Kurt Russell and some unique set design to bring it even remotely above total mediocrity. Unique set design? Most of this takes place in a junkyard. There's nothing unique. There is one set that's supposed to be on board a ship or a military base, and it's like basically it just looks like the main rec yard of a prison. Not a lot of creativity there either. I don't know where they're getting this creativity, really. There's nothing creative here. Did you know the soldiers in this? I already mentioned it once, but I'll mention it again. The high-tech super soldiers in this galaxy-trotting American Space Force, they don't even have thermal night vision. Yeah, so Kurt Russell's able to kill them with a knife just by standing against a wall close to them in the dark because they can't see him. What? Even for the 1990s, this is a logic fail. Come on now. Come on now. With a story as thin as paper, characters as interesting as cardboard, and a score that was clearly just replacing a James Horner temp track, Soldier is one summer blockbuster you can skip. Yeah, the score is like stuff that was copy-pasted out of other action movies, and it's very evident. I don't know where it came from. And there's also it almost turns into a music video in one sequence where it's supposed to give you emotional feelings, but it doesn't. And it shows Kurt Russell just kind of going through the day-to-day motions to fit in with this junk scavenger society on this planet. And he's just basically walking around looking at people and fixing things and doing little things and learning how to cut carrots on a cutting board and stuff. And during this whole montage, if you will, there's some kind of, I didn't care to look it up, but there's some kind of vocal, pop or some kind of pop rock singing song going on during all of this, female vocalist. And it's supposed to be so emotional and uplifting, I guess, but it just came across as cringy and stupid to me. And it was completely ineffective because it's kind of hard to sympathize with Kurt Russell or think anything emotional about him when he doesn't speak more than like 20 times in the whole film. He just stares at everything a lot. No, it's a complete fail. What else is left on my list? Um, yeah, why is this junk planet that's basically it's just a planet covered with junk as Earth Space Forces go there and just dump garbage on it on a daily basis. It has all these tropical snakes. Like it's a wasteland, pretty much a desert planet with piles of junk on it. But there are all kinds of like colorful tropical snakes on this, and the plot features like some of these snakes attacking people. Um, where did the snakes come from? When they showed me one snake, I thought, well, okay, there could be one of these snakes. Maybe it was in the junk that got dumped and it became part of the ecosystem. But nope, later in the film, they show like a whole gaggle of 4 or 5 varieties of tropical snake all attacking a super soldier. I'm like, what? It's like just this desert junk world, and it's got all these earth tropical snakes on it, and it's just never explained how that is. Come on now, ridiculous. What else is on my list? Yeah, the special forces are incompetent. They can't shoot straight. They don't have night vision. They're not even particularly athletic generally when they're fighting. They when they're doing their tactical movements, it's a complete fail. It doesn't they would have flunked out of basic training because the way they're going about fighting in a tactical environment is just straight up stupid, and they would have all gotten themselves killed very quickly in the real world, and in this film they do as well. And they're for super soldiers, they're completely incompetent militarily. And also um, these super soldiers, they're also led by officers which are also straight up stupid, like the military genius officers, not just Gary Busey, but his contemporary and his higher ranking officer in this film, also played by a well known actor, but I can't recall his name. He is also incompetent, and they're doing crazy stuff like acting like 13-year-olds, and they're getting everybody killed. And in fact, the villain officer, the evil guy, at the end of this film, he dies in a nuclear explosion. And the reason why he dies is because he's so incompetent that he can't remember a simple 4-digit disarm code on a nuclear device that he programmed himself. Like he couldn't remember if the last two digits of the 4 digits were 6 7 or 7 6, and he guessed wrong and blew them all up at the end. And that would work in like something that was designed to be like a parody or a comedy of some kind, but it's just straight up serious, and it's just seriously dumb. But basically the villain dies by his own incompetence because he couldn't remember a 4-digit pin code on a nuclear device. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Planet of Parking Meters. I think I already mentioned that. It should have been named, instead of being called whatever the name of the planet was. It had a cool sounding sci-fi name. It should have been called just flat out Planet of the Parking Meters, because there are old parking meters sticking out of the ground everywhere, and these settlers use them to string rope between them to like survive these gigantic dust storms that happen on this planet that threaten to blow them away at times. But there are parking meters everywhere, and so whatever junkyard they used for this film, they had an overabundance of old parking meters there, along with road signs from the 1990s and stuff, and so they just planted them all over the goddamn place, and it just didn't work in something that's supposed to be on an alien planet across this, interstellar space. Complete fail. Again, imagine like 1997 technology, but you're somehow an interstellar space force. It may be in like a little kid's cartoon this would work, but even then, no. It's just straight up, it didn't have the budget to do this properly. So I'm going to call this one, and yeah, 44% audience score. I think that's fair, but it could be 12%, just like the tomato meter, and I still would consider that accurate. I'm just shocked that all these 4 and 5 star reviews are on this thing. I don't know. I failed in my mission to find out why people think there's anything redeemable here. I guess if you're just a Kurt Russell fan and you want to see him play a soldier that doesn't speak hardly at all, then this is the thing for you. But I thought he was a much better soldier in the movie Stargate. He looked more like a soldier. He had a lot of dialogue. He felt like a real person, a real character. I'm not saying that Roland Emmerich's Stargate was like a masterpiece, but it was a hell of a lot better than this. Like, orders of magnitude better than Soldier. And Kurt Russell's character in Stargate was orders of magnitude better than he is here. So skip this and just watch Stargate again. This is just a flat out fail. And I will see you again on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.